All right, buckle up, everyone, because today we're diving deep into something seriously juicy.
Oh, I love a good deep dive. Especially when it involves Apple and, all those rumors that get us techies all riled up.
That's right. We're talking about the iPhone 17 Air,
Hmm.
or at least what everyone thinks it might be.
Okay, so set the stage for us. What's got everyone buzzing this time? What's the big, juicy secret that Apple's supposedly cooking up?
Well, the word on the street is this phone is going to be ridiculously thin, like thinner than we've ever seen before. Some are saying 6 millimeters, others are whispering about 5.5. I mean, can you even imagine?
Wow, 5.5 millimeters. Now, that's what I call pushing the limits. I mean, the iconic iPhone 6 was already considered super sleek, and we're talking about potentially going even thinner than that.
I know, right? It's mind-boggling.
Yeah.
But the big question is, where is all this coming from? How reliable are these rumors?
Well, we've got some pretty reputable sources chiming in on this one. Bloomberg, McRumors, The Information, analyst Ming-Chi Kuo, even some chatter from a Korean media outlet.
So not just your random internet whispers, then.
Oh, definitely not. These are some heavy hitters in the tech world, and when they start talking, people tend to listen.
Okay, so let's say for a minute that these rumors are on point. How on earth do they even cram all the tech into a phone that thin? I mean, we're talking about the battery, the processor, the camera, everything.
Right, it's a real head-scratcher. And it seems like to pull it off, Apple might have to make some pretty big sacrifices.
Well, this is where it gets interesting. Spill the tea. What kind of sacrifices are we talking about here?
Well, one of the most talked about rumors is that the iPhone 17 Air could ditch the physical SIM card slot altogether, like completely gone.
Wait, seriously? So eSIM only? Now that's a bold move? I mean, eSIM is getting more popular, sure, but it's not exactly universal yet.
You're telling me, imagine landing in a new country needing data and realizing your phone is stuck with eSIM while the local SIM cards are all, the traditional kind. Talk about a vacation killer.
Yeah, I could see how that would be a major headache for travelers, especially those who rely on swapping SIM cards in different countries.
Yeah.
And, what about folks who live in places where eSIM adoption is still lagging behind?
You're hitting on a really important point there. An eSIM-only iPhone would definitely create some winners and losers, no doubt. But let's talk about another potential sacrifice. The camera.
The camera, okay, I'm listening. Because cramming a good camera into a phone that thin can't be easy.
You got it. From what we're hearing, Apple might be considering a single-lens camera system for the iPhone 17 Air. They might even ditch the telephoto lens altogether to save space.
Hold on, a single lens camera in this day and age? Seriously. I mean, even budget phones are rocking multiple lenses these days. What's the thinking there?
Well, cost cutting is probably a factor. A single lens system is obviously cheaper to produce, and of course it helps them achieve that ultra-thin design.
I guess that makes sense from a business perspective, but wouldn't that mean sacrificing photo quality? I mean, there's a reason those multi-lens systems have become the norm.
Well, that's where Apple's computational photography magic comes in. They could utilize pixel binning technology, which essentially combines data from multiple pixels to create a larger, more detailed image. It's not the same as having a dedicated telephoto lens, but it could offer decent zoom capabilities.
So it's like using software to make up for the hardware limitations. Clever, but I'm still a little skeptical about the image quality, especially for those zoomed-in shots.
Skepticism is healthy, especially when we're talking about a company as influential as Apple. I mean, whatever they do with the 17 Air could potentially set a new standard for the entire smartphone industry.
Right. It's like their moves often ripple outwards.
Yeah.
Like when they got rid of the headphone jack, people freaked out, but then everyone else followed suit. Maybe this is another one of those Apple changes things, and everyone adjusts moments.
Possibly. It's going to be fascinating to see how it all plays out, that's for sure. And speaking of big changes, we've got to talk about the rumored price tag.
Yeah, the price. Because if they're making all these compromises, surely it's going to be reflected in the cost.
Well, there's speculation that the iPhone 17 Air is actually going to replace the Plus model in Apple's lineup.
Okay, so are we talking about a similar price point then? Because the Plus models aren't exactly budget-friendly?
You're right. We're probably looking at a price point somewhere around $899.
So not exactly cheap, but not quite as eye-watering as the Pro models either. But that raises another question. Who are they targeting with this phone? Is it just those who absolutely have to have the thinnest, sleekest phone on the market, even if it means sacrificing some features?
That's a great question, and one that I don't think anyone has a clear answer to yet. It's like, are they trying to create a whole new category of smartphone, one that prioritizes design and portability above all else?
It's like they're saying, here's a phone that's as much a fashion statement as it is a technological powerhouse.
Yeah.
But would people actually buy into that? Would they be willing to give up certain features for the sake of having a phone that's super thin?
It's like those super thin laptops. They look all sleek and cool, but then you realize you can barely plug anything into them.
Exactly. And with smartphones, it's not just about ports. It's about things like battery life, camera performance, durability, the things that make a smartphone actually smart.
Right, packing all those components into a super thin design. I mean, it could make repairs a nightmare.
Yeah.
And nobody wants a phone that's as fragile as a sheet of paper.
That's true. I love the idea of a phone that feels almost weightless in my hand, but not if it means I have to constantly worry about breaking it. So it seems like there's a lot to consider here, both for Apple and for consumers. We've got this drive towards thinner, lighter, more minimalist devices, but at what cost?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And I think the answer really depends on individual priorities.
Okay, so let's unpack that a little bit. What are some of the key factors someone might consider when deciding whether or not this super slim design is actually worth the trade-offs?
Well, I think it boils down to this. What matters more to you, aesthetics or functionality? I mean, if you're the kind of person who really prioritizes style and portability, a super thin iPhone might be really appealing.
Yeah, like a phone that you barely even notice in your pocket or your bag.
Exactly, just slips right in. There's definitely something elegant about that minimalist kind of design.
Oh, for sure. But then you have to think about what you might be giving up to get that.
Right, and that's where it gets really personal. I mean, if you're someone who lives and breathes photography, if you use your phone's camera for like professional quality stuff, a single lens system with no telephoto, that might be a no-go.
Yeah, for content creators, for anyone who's serious about photography, that lack of versatility could be a real pain. You'd miss those telephoto shots. You wouldn't have as many options for framing things.
And then there's that whole eSIM thing we were talking about.
Right, because as much as eSIM is growing, it's not like everyone's using it yet.
Exactly. And if you're someone who travels a lot, goes to places where eSIM isn't as common, or if you need multiple SIM cards for work or whatever, an eSIM-only phone could be a real logistical nightmare.
It's interesting, isn't it? It's almost like trading physical freedom, like swapping SIM cards for this digital freedom of a super slim phone.
It's a trade-off for sure, and one that might not be worth it for everyone. I think we also have to talk about durability and repairability.
Yeah, those are big ones, especially when you're talking about a phone that's so incredibly thin.
I mean, think about it. You're cramming all those components into such a small space. It's bound to be more fragile, more susceptible to damage.
Yeah, like if you drop it or if it gets bent.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
repairs could be a whole other issue, potentially more complicated and expensive.
So it's almost like you might end up sacrificing peace of mind just for the sake of having a slimmer phone.
I think that's a really good way to put it. It's a decision that each person has to make for themselves, weighing the pros and cons.
There's no right answer.
Yeah.
It's all about what matters most to you.
It feels like we're at this kind of turning point in smartphone design. On the one hand, there's this push towards thinner, lighter, more minimalist devices.
But on the other hand, we want our phones to do more and more.
It's a fascinating tension. And this iPhone 17 Air, if the rumors are true, seems to be pushing those boundaries more than ever before.
It's like they're saying, how thin can we possibly go? And I'm curious to see how they'll balance those competing priorities. The desire for sleek design versus the need for functionality.
One thing's for sure, it's going to generate a lot of buzz, a lot of debate.
Absolutely. People can have strong opinions about this one. It'll be interesting to see how consumers react to this potential shift in smartphone design.
Okay, so let's play this out for a second. Let's say the iPhone 17 Air launches, and it is everything the rumors say. It is super thin, eSIM, only single lens camera, the whole shebang. What kind of impact do you think that would have on the rest of the smartphone market?
It's a great question because Apple has this kind of trend-setting power.
Oh, absolutely. If they go all in on this super slim thing, other manufacturers are bound to follow suit.
It wouldn't be surprising to see a wave of new phones all competing for the title of thinnest and lightest.
Exactly. And that could lead to some really interesting innovations, new materials, new manufacturing processes, even more focus on miniaturizing components.
It's like those constraints could actually drive creativity.
Forcing companies to think outside the box to come up with new solutions. But of course, there's also the risk that they'll go too far.
Right. We've talked about the potential sacrifices in terms of the camera and SIM card options. But what about other things like battery life, durability, even repairability? Could those suffer if phones get thinner and thinner?
Those are all valid concerns. Even with all the advancements in battery technology, you're still limited by physics.
Right, there's only so much power you can pack into such a small space.
Exactly. And when you're shaving millimeters off the thickness of a phone, every bit of space counts.
You might end up gaining a few millimeters in thinness, but losing hours of battery life in the process.
And then there's the durability factor. A super thin phone might look sleek, but it's also more prone to bending or breaking if it's dropped or, if it's under pressure.
You don't want a phone that feels like it could snap in half if you sit down wrong.
Exactly. And speaking of potential problems, have you thought about how easy it might be to steal a super thin phone?
That's a good point. It would be barely noticeable in your pocket.
A pickpocket's dream come true.
So there's some security concerns to think about as well. And what about repairs?
Oh, that's another big one. With all those delicate components packed into such a tight space, repairs could get really complicated and really expensive.
You might have to replace the whole phone if something goes wrong, just because it's too difficult to fix individual parts.
It's almost like you're not just buying a phone, you're buying into a whole world of potential repair costs and headaches.
Right, so it seems like there's a lot to weigh here. On one hand, you have the allure of a phone that's incredibly thin and light, something that pushes the boundaries of design.
But on the other hand, you have to think about the potential trade-offs in terms of functionality, durability, and security.
It's about finding the right balance between form and function, style and substance.
And sometimes that balance might not be the thinnest phone on the market.
Sometimes a little extra thickness can actually be a good thing.
It can give you a bigger battery, a better camera system, a more durable design.
It's all about finding the phone that truly fits your lifestyle and meets your needs.
And that's what makes the smartphone market so dynamic. There's such a wide range of choices, from the super slim to the rugged and feature-packed.
It's like a tech buffet, and everyone can find something they like.
And as technology keeps evolving, I'm sure we'll see even more diverse and innovative designs in the future.
All right, so we've explored the rumors, we've analyzed the potential trade-offs, and we've discussed the broader impact this could have on the smartphone industry. But now I want to get a little bit more personal.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Let's put ourselves in the shoes of the consumer. Let's say the iPhone 17 Air launches tomorrow with all its rumored specs and features. Would you actually be tempted to buy it?
Ooh, that's a tough one. What about you?
I gotta say, part of me is really drawn to that whole super thin thing. I mean, who doesn't love a phone that looks sleek and modern? But I also can't ignore those potential downsides we were talking about.
Yeah, it's a real tug of war, isn't it? The allure of cutting-edge design versus those practical concerns. Like, for me, the camera situation would be a major sticking point. I'm not a pro photographer or anything, but I do like having a good telephoto lens for those zoomed-in shots.
Exactly. So if they go with just a single lens on the 17 Air, that would definitely make me hesitate. They'd really have to prove that their software can make up for that missing hardware.
Right, like, show me the magic, Apple. I wouldn't just take their word for it. I'd need to see some real-world comparisons, some convincing reviews before I'd be sold.
And then there's the whole eSIM thing. I travel enough that having a physical SIM card is still important to me.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be scrambling to find an eSIM provider in a foreign country just so I can get online.
Oh, absolutely. And even if eSIM becomes more widespread, it's still a potential hassle for people who rely on multiple SIM cards, for work or personal reasons. So Apple would need to offer a pretty compelling solution there.
Yeah. They'd have to convince me that I wouldn't be sacrificing convenience for the sake of a slimmer phone. And speaking of sacrifices, durability would be another big concern for me.
Oh, for sure. You wouldn't want a phone that you're constantly afraid of breaking, especially if it's going to cost a fortune to repair.
Exactly. I mean, accidents happen, right? So I'd want to feel confident that my phone could handle a few bumps and drops without completely falling apart.
It's like you want a phone that's both beautiful and tough, not just a pretty face.
Right. So for me, the iPhone 17 Air would have to tick a lot of boxes before I'd be ready to commit. They'd have to nail the camera, address those eSIM concerns, and convince me that this super thin design doesn't come at the expense of durability.
Sounds like you're going in with a healthy dose of skepticism, which is always a good thing, right? I mean, it's easy to get caught up in the hype, but it's important to really think about whether a new device actually fits your needs and your lifestyle.
Totally. It's like the shiniest new gadget isn't always the best gadget for you. Sometimes those less flashy, more practical options are the real winners.
Exactly. And the great thing about the smartphone market is that there's so much variety out there. There's something for everyone. Whether you prioritize design, functionality, or affordability, There's a phone out there that's perfect for you.
Well said. And I think that's a great note to end on. We've had a lot of fun exploring the rumors surrounding the iPhone 17 Air, but ultimately the decision of whether or not to buy it is a personal one.
Absolutely. Do your research, weigh the pros and cons, and most importantly, choose a phone that makes you happy.
Couldn't agree more. And that wraps up another deep dive into the world of tech. We'll be back soon with more insights, analysis, and maybe even a few more juicy rumors.
Until then, stay curious, folks.